Welcome, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. Coming to you from the Podblog studio in St. George, Utah, and produced by Markel Consulting, LLC. I'm your host, Dave Markel. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. This is part 2 of a 4-part series, and it's an interview with Jennifer Jones. Here's a quick recap of the reason behind this podcast and this 4-part series. Several years ago, I was asked to present at Hamilton University in New York State on trauma-informed interview principles and the neuroscience of trauma to a large multidisciplinary audience comprised of law enforcement, victim advocates, mental health workers, and Title IX administrators and staff. It was a 4-hour morning presentation. That afternoon, there was a panel of 4 young people who had been asked to share their own stories of being raped while enrolled as students at various campuses in New York State. These 4 people, Mac McDonald, Jennifer Jones, Ellie Freeman, and Samantha McCoy, were brave and courageous enough to say yes to being on this panel. They participated for the sake of educating the audience on how not to treat victims of sexual assault. Their stories were hard to hear. Yet even more difficult was the realization that when they reported their rapes to authorities, each were treated with shame, disbelief, and blame for their own rapes. Jennifer's story isn't any more or less compelling than those of the other 3 panelists that I interviewed. But the way that Jennifer tells her story and the impact that this experience had on her life is nothing short of extraordinary. In her own words, she describes herself as resilient, strong, and fierce when it comes to being a survivor. And when asked how she felt about being interviewed for the SAS podcast, Jennifer said that if anyone feels validated, loved, and supported by hearing her story, then she knows she told it with a purpose. Here's a heads up about Jennifer's interview. You need to be prepared for a powerfully delivered story of manipulation and coercion, told with candor and honesty. If you're a victim or a survivor of sexual assault, you'll feel a strong connection with Jennifer. If you're someone who tends to blame and shame victims for their own rape, then you're in for a forcefully delivered education. Listen closely. Here's Jennifer. Jennifer Jones, it is so great to have you on this show. How have you been?
I've been all right. Been a whirlwind, doing a lot, getting a lot accomplished, and doing that public service in my personal and work life. So doing good.
Good. Tell our audience a little bit about what you do now.
So what I do is through a grant-funded program at a local university, I serve victims of sexual assault, dating, domestic violence, and stalking. I also do a lot of prevention education and bystander intervention trainings with students, faculty, and staff to address the issues and make sure that their voices are heard.
I would imagine that your own personal experiences have contributed a lot to your success and your ability to do that job. Would I be accurate in saying that?
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to be on Sex Assault Survivor Stories, this podcast, because it is designed to give people in your situation a platform, but also to educate others who are in similar situations or who have had similar experiences to learn a little bit more about why they feel the way they feel, why they think the way they think, why they have intrusive memories, and why things are still triggering, and why life is still difficult because of the sexual assault or rape that occurred to them. And I appreciate your willingness to talk about that. So, Jennifer, if you could please tell our audience, what are you able to tell us about your experience?
Sure. The first thing I will share is that there are good days and bad days. I was sexually assaulted 14 years ago. It seems like it was more recent some days, and some days it feels like it's in the back of the closet. We don't think about it. I don't talk about it. But what I can say is that before this incident occurred, I had a long history of intimate partner violence as well as sexual violence and witnessing violence at home. So going into the night that it happened, I just gone through a breakup, was in a bad mental health kind of situation post breakup with a boyfriend that was fairly abusive and manipulative. So it was a couple weeks after that breakup, and I was not in the right state of mind anyways. But I had just dug in my heels. I wanted to work over October break. They gave us the option to either go home and spend time with family during the break, or I could continue to work. I worked 2 jobs at the college while maintaining 21 credit hours that semester. So glutton for punishment, I guess you'd say. So needless to say, I had a lot going on. I was in my room and, well, let me back up a little bit. So there was this guy, Joe. He was dating one of my roommates. We all lived in a suite. She lived in the room right across from me. It was late. I want to say it was either Thursday or Friday night. And I heard a knock at the door. I let Joe in, and he tells me that he was looking for his sweatshirt. He thinks he left it in my roommate's room. So I let him in. He comes in, and it's late at this point. It's like after 11 at night. I figured he was just doing his thing. I wasn't even sure why he stuck around on October break, but it was what it was. He came in, and I turned around because I figured, yeah, he'll just grab his shirt and leave. He'll leave me alone. He comes in to my room, and he closes the door. At that point, I kind of give him the, what the fuck do you think you're doing question. And he convinces me that that's what I wanted, was him in my room. He did that through an hour or so of reasoning that what he wanted with me wasn't wrong and I would be fine. And I just, at that point, I was just exhausted. I'm like, yeah, whatever. So we end up on my bed, and the memories of everything is kind of fuzzy. It comes back in patches. It comes back in nightmares and night terrors sometimes. But what I can remember is him forcing me to give him a blowjob. What I remember is him forcing himself on me and in me. Looking back at it now, I think I'm just stupid. I had a gallon-sized jar, you get the pretzels in or whatever at the store, like huge jars. I had it filled with condoms because my major was health education and health science. I was all about, prevention, but not necessarily in my case. I was not expecting that to be used against me, especially by my rapist. So I don't know if he took that as permission, but it definitely wasn't. So he kept losing his erection. So he would go over and over, put on new condoms. And in the meantime, I'm bleeding and I keep thinking I'm not here. This isn't happening. And then my other thought was, well, if I just lay still and let him get it over with, he'll leave and I'll be all right. So part of my thinking was, he keeps losing his erection. Well, I wonder if I do something that will turn him on, he'll keep it and then get it over with and be gone. And then I can just forget this night ever happened. So about 4:30 in the morning, he finally finished and he left. Not so much as a, hey, how you doing? Thanks. Like, not that I would want to be thanked, but nothing. The only thing he said was, don't tell so-and-so, my roommate. She wouldn't believe you anyways. I'm like, okay. So here I am. It's 4:30 in the morning. I'm still bleeding. I feel disgusting. The first thing I did was call my mom. Like I said, it's 4:30 in the morning. As a foster parent now, I would be terrified if I got a call from one of my kids at 4:30 in the morning. So I wake her up and she says, what's wrong? And I explain the bits and pieces that I can remember, the stuff that, really stuck with me. And knowing my mom's trauma history kind of prepared me, but not as prepared as I would have liked for that conversation. My mother, after hearing what I shared with her, my mother had said, well, you need to call your roommate and apologize for having sex with her boyfriend and let her know that happened and you need to apologize. And nothing about, was I okay? Where is he now? Are you safe? Nothing like that. And so that put me in the position where I'm feeling like, she's right. I got it. I was just on that autopilot at that point. I'm like, all right, I'll call her and I'll talk to her and I'll tell her what happened. So at this point, it's about 5 o'clock in the morning. And so I call my roommate. She lives on Long Island, or lived on Long Island. And she gets woken up by the phone call too. And I tell her what my mom told me to tell her. I said, Joe came into our suite last night and some things happened and I just need to apologize to you. I'm so sorry. And she says, well, thanks for telling me. We'll deal with this when I get back. Because she had gone home on break. At that point, I don't remember a ton. I remember getting in the shower and staying in it and sitting on the floor of the shower looking at the bench seat that was in the shower and just thinking, if I hit my head hard enough, I might black out and I might forget that this happened. And I remember just sitting there watching the blood go down the drain and thinking, what the fuck just happened? Am I okay? Am I going to be okay? I have to see this guy again. Because my roommate didn't say, okay, well, I believe you, or, well, I'm totally going to dump that guy. He's a jerk. Nothing like that. So I just felt like a lowlife, like a homewrecker, like, that I had asked for it because I had a big jar of condoms and all I ever talked about was safe sex and everything else. Did I ask for it? So those were the things running through my head. And that's pretty much what I'm willing to share besides what happened afterwards. The next couple days, I was really trying to cover it up. I put on my best face. I went to work. I did my classwork. I did tests. I couldn't tell you exactly what I did in those 2 days. I went out with my rugby mates. I told them my story on a very drunken late night. And they rallied. They rallied around me. And I would say if that didn't happen, I probably wouldn't be here.
I am really sorry for the experience that you've had.
Thank you.
And I obviously can tell that this is still such a difficult thing to deal with. But I'm wondering if I could ask a few questions about that. I know you're cautious about what you will and won't share, and I totally respect that. I appreciate that so much. What are you able to tell me about what your thoughts were as he's trying to convince you that you really want this, or that he should be in your room? What were your thoughts?
My thoughts went from, this guy's crazy. What? No, I have no interest in you. Get out of my room. To, maybe it make me feel better. I wasn't feeling so hot about myself at that time. And I felt like maybe this was the attention that I needed. And he was, talking about how he had wanted me for months. And since the first time he met me, he was only dating my roommate to get to me, all these things. So I was a little flattered, but also disgusted. And then when I realized, okay, he's bigger than I am. He is a wrestler. No one will probably believe me even if I told them that he wouldn't leave the room. Because some would say, well, you play rugby, you're a big girl, like you can handle yourself. What was going through my mind at that time was just, I couldn't really believe what was happening was happening. I didn't want to be persuaded. And I knew my morals and my values, but at the same time, I was lost.
Tell me how your body felt when he started touching you and doing things to you.
My body felt fluid, like if I wanted to move my right foot, it wouldn't move. It felt like my whole body would have to move. I also felt betrayed by my body for, responding to his touch. At first it was very gentle and very kind of persuasive, if you will, and then it was not. But at first it felt okay and it felt good, and that kind of tricked me into thinking that it was okay, and no one would ever find out, which, as we know, is not the case.
As you think about those feelings, both physical and thought wise, how does that make you feel now?
Angry, frustrated. Very.
Tell us more about that anger.
I'm angry because I'm still mad at myself a little bit. I'm also angry because it feels like at that time my body wasn't mine. It was abused by so many different people that it got to the point where his abuse just felt like par for the course. Like, this is how my body is meant to be treated, and I just gotta suck it up and deal with it. And the messages I was getting from other people close to me and important to me was just not validating that what he did was wrong. So I'm angry at some level for the people around me that made me feel like I wasn't worth it or wasn't able and supported enough to believe that I didn't deserve that. That's a lot of double negatives, but to feel that I didn't deserve that to happen to me. And then the other part of the anger is I'm still upset about how the school handled things, but we'll get to that in a minute. But the anger comes from all the second guessing from the moment he stepped in the suite. And why did I let him in? Why didn't I try to fight? That's what I'm angry about. But I know why. I know, knowing what I know now about trauma and rape, I can explain it away all day, but it doesn't make the angry stuff go away.
Tell our audience, if you don't mind, what it is you do know now. Help us understand, if you could, what that meant to think back on it and realize now what you would have done differently with that anger.
I know now that after talking with so many survivors and learning what I've learned through research and also through practice, what I know is that when someone's in that position, you can't expect them to be able to intervene for themselves. You don't know the mindset that they're in before. You don't know the upbringing that they've had, or the other experiences that they've had, and allow them the grace to not know any better. And knowing what I know now, such as trauma-informed practices and interviewing and how to support survivors that are just trying to figure out what the fuck happened. Sometimes it's getting it out and feeling that those same feelings with other people, and knowing that there's not ever one typical reaction. There's not a good way or a bad way to feel. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be, disappointed and frustrated with yourself and frustrated with the people around you and the person who did it, obviously. And knowing that it's okay the people around you don't believe you. You have to believe yourself that what happened happened. Even if you gotta shout it out on a podcast that you know what happened to you was wrong. And it took me a while to know it was wrong. I can share that with you as well. How I finally figured it out, I guess.
Sure. Let's talk about that.
So, as I previously mentioned, I was a health science major. I was in my junior year. And I was super stoked about my comprehensive sexuality class. Because, as you know, I had the condoms. I was all about safe sex and sex positivity. And then after that happened, I couldn't look at a condom the same way. And my professor gave a lecture about sexual assault and rape. And when I knew the topic was coming, I was on the syllabus. I was one of the few students who actually reads the syllabus. And I knew it was coming, but I didn't think it applied to me. I didn't think I was even in that genre. I mean, I know people who had been, violently raped or drugged and raped, but I didn't think I fell into those categories. Or stranger rape. That's what a lot of people usually think of when they hear the word rape. Some guy in a van. But as we know now, it's so many times somebody you know and trust. So I'm sitting in class. I remember where my seat was. It was middle row right next to the window, so I could still people watch and pretend to pay attention. I did love my classes, don't get me wrong. I was a good student. And she starts talking about coercion and manipulation in consent and what it means to give consent and what it means not to have consent. And when I heard her talk about coercion, manipulation, power and control, and how people who have experienced violence in the past or trauma in the past are more prone to experience it again, it was like a bomb dropped. I remember just looking out the window the rest of the class and pretending to be fine and just stoic and calm as could be. And anyone who knows me will say, that's not Jen. Don't know who that is, but that's not Jen. I'm usually very active in class. I ask a lot of questions to everybody else's annoyance. I try to crack jokes, but no, I was staring out the window, waiting for the time to go by so I could get out of class. She was not oblivious to this. Dr. Curtis had me in a lot of her classes previously, so she knew this was not normal behavior from me. She stopped by my desk before class ended and said, Jen, stop in my office after class. And I said, oh, geez, now what? I just had this dropped on me and now she wants to talk to me. So something's up. So I go into her classroom and she's like, can you tell me what you were thinking when I was going over this stuff? And I said, well, I was thinking it didn't apply to me, blah, blah, blah. And I'm fine. I'm totally fine. I'm good. Totally good. And she said, well, it looks like this affected you in some way. I said, well, I know somebody that was affected. And, my mom went through this kind of thing when she was my age. And, it sucks. And I feel for my mom and, my friends. And she said, I'm just going to cut to the point. I feel like you've been through something like this and you may or may not be ready to talk about it, but I'm here if you want to. And it just all came out. And this was a couple weeks after the incident. And I just, as much as I can remember stuff I wasn't sure about, the timeline is still, I can tell you what time he came in the room and what time he left, but I could not tell you, at what time he did what. I just know it was a long ass time. So she thanked me for sharing. She told me I was safe, but that because of her position, she would have to share that information with the necessary people and need to make sure that I'm okay. She also encouraged me to talk to campus police, and she said she would even walk me down there and that she would call ahead that we could talk to Mary, who was the only female police officer that they had at the time.
So many questions in my head about how this all worked its way out in terms of you reporting it. But let's go back, if we could, for a minute.
Sure.
You talked about consent and manipulation, which is one of the really strong aspects of, like you mentioned, with the acquaintance rape situations, and that this wasn't consent at all. You realized that at some point. One of the things that I've taught, when fear is in the room, consent is not. And I'm wondering what you can tell us about any feelings of fear that you may have had while the assault was happening, or while he was convincing you that this was what you wanted and needed.
Fear was there. I was scared that I would get hurt. I was scared that he would tell everybody. And I was scared that I wouldn't be able to get out of the room if I tried. I was scared that I wasn't going to be pretty enough or sexy enough or turn him on enough that he would just get it over with. That he kept losing his erection because of me, and I wasn't pretty, and I wasn't he wasn't enjoying himself because of me. There was that fear, and the fear of self-doubt. Am I really feeling and seeing and experiencing what I think I am, or is this projecting from past experiences?
Help us understand how that fear played out then and there.
Then and there, it turned into, well, if I just stay still, and that worked for a little while. And then the fear turned into survival, kind of. If I just get him to finish, he'll leave. So what can I do to make that happen? To try to help myself and get out of that situation as quickly as I could. And then there's times that the fear turned into just blanking out, just letting things happen.
What do you remember seeing while the assault was happening?
I just kept looking at the door. Like, is someone gonna come? Like, but then realizing it's not like I'm screaming. I'm not, calling for help. I was scared too. Back to that fear. I remember looking at my comforter, because a lot of the times I was on my stomach and just thinking, this is the stupidest blanket I've ever owned. Stars and moons. That's like middle school bullshit. I shouldn't even have this anymore. Like, why? This is dumb. I hate this. I don't want to see this anymore. Like, that's all I could think. I remember the next morning, once everything happened, I stripped the bed and I threw it in the dumpster. I didn't even put it in a garbage can because I didn't want anybody to find it. So I balled it up, made sure none of the blood and stuff was showing, and I went outside to the dumpsters and threw it in. That's what I remember seeing. And then, like I said, I kept looking at that condom jug going, that was a dumb idea. Why did I do that?
Are you able to tell us about any smells that you remember?
Yeah. Axe body spray. I couldn't tell you which one. I've stayed away from them ever since. I remember it was a black can, but like all Axe deodorants are black cans. And then that stale sweat smell. So sometimes those smells can be hard.
What about any sounds? Are you able to tell us about things that you heard while this was happening?
I do. At one point, because he kept losing his erection, he put on pornography. And I remember it was one of my roommate's DVDs, because back then we didn't have on demand, and he had put it in. And I'll never forget the title, and I'll never forget the sounds and what I saw, and feeling betrayed because I was aroused by said sounds, and so was he, so that helped get things done. But at the same time, I was sickened by it. I could not watch to this day, I have a hard time with pornography because it just triggers me.
What other sites do you remember?
I remember looking outside and saying, is it light yet? Like thinking to myself, is it daytime yet? Will he just leave when the sun comes up? Will this just stop? And the other sites were him, trying to get an erection and keep it. And just thinking to myself, there goes another condom. There goes another condom. Like, I think 6 we went through. And at one point, I did think, I hope I don't get sick or pregnant from this. I remember thinking that. And then later I gotten into a new relationship and I decided to get myself tested for stuff because I was worried and maybe he gave me something and I didn't want to give it to this new person, and I was scared, and I didn't want to do it at the school health center because they would start asking questions, and I didn't want that it tied. I didn't want anybody finding out or getting back to him. And so I went to the local clinic. It wasn't a Planned Parenthood, but it was like one. And I went in. I was very vague. I said, I just want to get tested. I'm getting a new relationship. I just want to know. And they went up one side and down the other. You can't have multiple partners. Don't you know this is risky? Why would you put yourself in that position? And it was the last person I talked to who did the HIV test. And she asked me, why are you here today? And I was so pissed at that point. I'm like, I came here to get fucking tested, and you're giving me this shit about multiple partners when I didn't even want multiple partners. Like, that's not me. And here I am just trying to do the healthy, responsible thing, and I'm getting hollered at. And it was the final person, and I finally said, you know what? I was raped. And you can take that test and shove it, basically is what I said. And I left. I get a call 2 days later from the director, apologizing profusely. But the damage was done. I did not get sick from it, thankfully. I also did not get pregnant from it, thankfully. Especially with today's legislation. So, yeah, I forget what you even asked, Dave. I'm sorry. Other things I remembered or something.
I know you've been through the type of training that I've done before, and how we talk about the way memory works and how sensory memories are embedded and encoded first and strongest.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I'm going with this, was wanting to talk about some of those sensory perceptions that you had in terms of the remembrances, because I think when it comes to educating others, as you've been educated, that it's important for them to know why certain smells bother them or trigger them, certain sights. And it strikes me that you mentioned that blanket and the moons and the stars on that blanket. And how did it feel emotionally to throw those things into the dumpster?
Felt like I was throwing my childhood away, now that I look back on it. Yeah. And that blanket was given to me by my mom, who had done I guess you'd call it like a makeover of our room. She got a workers' comp settlement or something. She got extra money. So she did things for me and my brother. And redoing my room was one of those. Painting it and putting this trim border up that was stars and moons. I mean, I was all about it back in the day. And that blanket was one of them. And part of me felt like that was my childhood. And then the other part of it was when I was 14, a family friend molested me on that blanket too. So I thought, if I get rid of it, maybe this will stop happening to me.
The thought processes that you've expressed here in this interview, in terms of how the ripple effect from one memory can have an impact on so many other aspects of this same story. And that blanket seems to be one of those things. And maybe you hadn't even realized it until this moment, that blanket held a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
In your memory of the experience now.
For sure.
Are you able to talk to us about parts of the experience that you've tried to forget and can't?
Yeah. Things I try to forget are when it felt good. Like in the beginning when he was massaging my shoulders or, touching my hair and telling me how pretty I was. Those are the things that I try to forget. That part of it felt good and that feels really wrong. Other parts that I try to forget, the pornography part for sure. Because I felt to this day I still struggle with that. And I guess that's why I try to forget about it, is that pornography is so normalized in our culture and in the dating world and all of that, that I should be able to watch that and not have an issue, but I have an issue. So it reminds me that I'm not untouched by that. Other things that I wish I could forget would be the smell. I have struggled being in department stores like Target or Walmart and going into like the men's fragrance section. There was a point when I was working at CVS in the pharmacy, but I remember getting triggered like really hard because a kid was spraying Axe in the aisle that was right next to the pharmacy. And all I could remember the rest of my shift was what went down. And I was trying my hardest to work hard and get things done, but I kept flashing back because of the smell.
I think it's important for other victims, other survivors to understand what you're talking about, in the sense that this is not unusual, that certain aspects that trigger you can not only at that moment in that story you just told about working at CVS, but even today trigger you in such ways that it's interruptive and intrusive and painful. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that?
I pride myself on being a survivor most days and most of the time, because I feel like that allows me to connect with people better, especially the folks that I work with, the students coming forward and maybe telling their story for the first time, that they feel that genuine connection. Of course, I don't come out and tell them, I was raped when I was a junior in college. No, I don't share that, but I can relate. Triggers. Get back on the topic, Jen. I'm not avoiding, I swear. Triggers. I just want to normalize that it happens and it's okay that it happens. What happened to you wasn't okay, but what you're experiencing when you're triggered or feel like you're about to be triggered, because I feel like there's that buildup that you're like, was that what I really think it is? And am I feeling what I really think I am? That sometimes you gotta allow it to remind you, and also to remind you how far you've come and how resilient you are, and that you're kicking ass today, and that he can't take that away from you. He can't take that away from me. And yeah, my assault was 14 years ago, but I think about it on a weekly basis, sometimes more than that. And it might be because of the work I do, or I may have gotten into the work that I do because of that. I feel like everybody heals at a different rate, and healing looks different to everybody. When I'm at work or when I'm helping a friend or a family member through something, I am the professional. I am, relatable, sympathetic, patient. But when I'm in the moment and I need time to myself, if I am triggered or I'm otherwise feeling like I'm run down, I need a moment, I take it. I allow myself the grace to just be in the moment and feel it. And that it's okay and it's normal. And what I can share with the listeners is that trauma is hard. There's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days. There's going to be days that you feel like you're rocking it and nothing ever happened to you. And then there's going to be days where you feel like you got hit by a fucking truck. And it's okay to have those days. It's okay to be triggered, and it's okay not to know what to do about it. Maybe because it was 14 years ago, I know what to do for myself now. But I can tell you the first few years, I certainly did not.
What advice do you have for other victims and survivors that are trauma-informed coping mechanisms that maybe you've learned and have grown from and healed somewhat from?
Definitely. Grounding, for sure. Not just grounding in the sense of, what you feel, touch, smell, What I mean is I'm safe. Where I am right now, I feel safe. And if you're triggered and in that moment and you don't feel safe, I'd say that's the first thing you should do is get to a place or a person or a destination that feels safe. And that can be something as simple as closing your door or, sitting in the car listening to a song that you like. It could be a person, someone that you love and trust. And then connecting within yourself that I am safe right now. I can feel this pillow. I can hear the kids playing outside. I can see Dave, kind of, sort of. And I feel warm and I'm doing okay. I'm just checking in on yourself. And I think another big thing is connecting with others that have gone through it and not feeling like your story has to be bad enough to count. I remember feeling that way when I started public speaking about my assault. I felt like mine didn't count, that I don't get credit or I don't count as a survivor or a victim. It's just something happened to me, and that's life. That's how I was treated. That's how my mom was treated. That's how, lots of my cousins and friends have been treated. And that it's normal to experience that. And then having that shock factor of, no, that's not normal. That should not have happened to me. And allowing yourself the time and space to feel it because you're grieving and it's okay to grieve. Because there's a piece of you that is forever changed. And when I started doing the public speaking, and it wasn't until I spoke for the troopers at Hamilton College, which is where I met you, Dave, that we were all sitting in the room, and there were several glasses of wine taken and very bubbly, and conversations were going good. We called ourselves a sisterhood, that we were part of a sisterhood that no one ever thinks they're going to be a part of, and that so many people are ashamed to be a part of. And we said that we were going to work together to help others feel united and supported. That was our goal. Not to necessarily recruit and hope that these things happen to people, to put them into that survivorship circle. But for people to come out and say, this happened to me, I need help, this happened to me, I just want someone to talk to, this happened to me, can we just feel this for the moment? And whether that means closing the door on it for another day or putting it in a box or in a journal, that looks different to different people. But I will say to this day that sisterhood analogy sticks with me. And if this story helps one person feel comfortable enough to share their story and feel validated and loved and supported, then I did it with a purpose.
Thank you so much for saying that and for verbalizing that opportunity for others to use your story as a door to some level of healing.
Right.
Trauma never goes away.
No.
The pain is always there, but there are ways to cope and there are ways to heal and there are ways to grow. And I think you're a prime example of that. And you're exactly why I wanted you on this show. And I look at your accomplishments, not only that day that we met and being able to talk about it, but being able to talk about it now and the way you're working with others in your job and providing some of those same type of coping mechanisms and pieces of education and opportunities for people to have support. Doing an interview like this, Jennifer, is obvious. And I knew this was going to happen. You knew it was going to happen. There's triggering, there's tears, there's issues that come up. And I can't just, say thanks for your time. It's been great interviewing you and talking with you. We'll see you again in the future sometime. I need to know, and I think the listeners should know too, that when we are done with this interview, I'd like to know, what were your plans? What were your thoughts? How did you visualize what was going to happen when we were done talking and the the microphones were turned off and we weren't being recorded anymore?
My visualization was, one, I'm going to take a couple Tylenol because I have a headache because of stress. And then I was going to dry my eyes and go out and play with the kids because I can hear them outside my window and they're having fun. And I feel like that's what I need right now. And it allows me to kind of put it aside for a moment. And then once it's just me and Steve and we're eating our dinner and relaxing, then I can just kind of have a good cry, a good talk. So I'm very grateful to have that. I'm very grateful to have the kids, not as a distraction, but as another outlet that I can put good emotion into.
Absolutely.
And feel good about. I'm also very grateful to have a partner that can support me through all this. I could not do this without him. He's been great. And when I told him about this interview, he shared with me again, he's also a survivor. And he says he would never be able to put it into words in the platform that we're doing right now. But he thanks me for sharing my story and helping others.
I do too. I thank you so much. I want to know how you feel about having done this. Now that we've recorded this, do you have any feelings of regret? What are your feelings?
No regret. I have no regret about sharing it with you. I sincerely hope that it helps someone or lots of people, and I hope that others can feel validated and feel like they're not crazy. I know that for a long time I felt like I wasn't me, or I couldn't connect to the genuine me. And I think finding that and connecting back with what happened to me, that what happened to me was wrong, that I'm okay now, really took me from being a victim to being a survivor. I stress that with everybody that I know that's been through it, that one day you're going to look back on this and say, hell yeah, that happened to me and I'm okay. And I'm resilient and I'm strong and I'm kick-ass. And, it's always going to be there, but use it to your advantage. And I don't mean that in a mean way or in a degrading way. What I mean it is that is something that you survived. You lived through it. This is your experience, absolutely. But one day you're going to look back on it and say, I survived that. I am resilient. I'm strong. I'm fierce. And I got through it. And hopefully that will help you connect with others and also empathize and give yourself some space for that.
Absolutely. I hope the same thing for others. And that's why I started this podcast. And I'm
absolutely
thrilled.
Long time coming, Dave.
I know. But life sometimes gets in the way of some of our best laid plans. But
I understand that wholeheartedly.
Jennifer, your willingness to be here and talk to us. I know we've talked several times since the not too distant past of doing that summit with you, that this was still going to happen. And I'm honored. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. I would love to have you be a guest again in the not too distant future. Would you consider coming back?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Dave.
That does it for another episode of SAS. Thanks for listening. Listen to a new episode each week. And please remember to subscribe, rate each episode, and spread the word about this important podcast, because we all know someone who's been affected by sexual assault or rape. Remember to start by believing, and let's all do our share to help bring justice to victims of rape and sexual assault. We'll talk to you next week.